I used to live with my grandmother, who died a few years ago. My grandmother had suffered a cerebral infarction during her lifetime, so she couldn't use her arms or legs at all, and she couldn't even speak. She could only mumble and grunt. Because I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, I felt sorry for her whenever I saw her. One day, my family gathered together at my house to celebrate a big holiday. While we were eating delicious food and chatting with each other, my grandmother was sitting alone in her room. A few hours had passed, and it was time for everyone to go home. So my relatives said their goodbyes. However, my grandmother was still in her room at that time. So I stayed with her. I sat next to her, just in case. "Grandma, do you want to go outside and say goodbye to everyone?" I asked, looking at her face. Then Grandma slowly turned her head towards me and opened her mouth. "I'm embarrassed." At that instant, I couldn't believe that she spoke with such clear and accurate pronunciation. A few years later, after my grandma had died, I told my family what happened that day when I was at the funeral hall, but no one believed me. Today, I'm going to talk about a story that I read somewhere. A few years ago, a body was found in the countryside. It was especially difficult to identify the victim or the perpetrator of that incident because the body had been dead for quite a long time, and to make matters worse, the bones had changed and were bleached. However, the police found one strange thing in this difficult situation. Only one finger from its body remained completely intact. They asked the National Forensic Service, and they finally completed the identification on the body's finger. Furthermore, they succeeded to arrest the criminal as a result of the investigation. It turned out that the assailant was her roommate. They said that he beat her to death on a rainy day and buried her in the mountain behind their house. After that, the detective who was in charge said in his interview, "When you're in charge of a case, there are often things that occur that can't be explained. However, I can tell you that ghosts really exist." I'll admit that what I'm about to tell you is not that creepy. My grandmother passed away not too long ago. After staying 3 days in the funeral home, we were supposed to go to the cemetery following her cremation. They said it would take about an hour, so my mom told me to take a nap in the car until the cremation was done. Since I was the one who had to drive later, I went back to my car alone and fell asleep. However, not long after, someone started shaking me. I heard my name, so I slowly opened my eyes, and my grandmother was sitting next to me. "Grandma?" I asked, rubbing my eyes, and she smiled at me. "Yes, it's me. Your grandpa is calling me. I'll go first, so stop sleeping and get up." I really missed her. Crying in my dream, I suddenly woke up with a surge of longing for her. I kept crying and then came out of the car. At that moment, I saw my family walking towards me, carrying a box of grandmother's ashes and her picture. I immediately told my mom about my dream, and then she patted me on the back and said this: "I guess Grandma wanted to say goodbye before she left. Maybe you were the only one who was sleeping, so she wanted to say goodbye to you."